Right. Welcome to be here. Actually, been an honor because this is my first time into a Mahayana Vietnamese temple. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity. Those in the rear, am I speaking loud enough? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure? Okay. Some of you have been with me throughout the IBAA sessions. You know, I have started my little cycle actually about these novices questions. If you've been wondering why it is 6, because in the Khuddaka Nikaya, there's a little piece of sutra that, for those of you who are not familiar with it, as you know, the Buddha would only allow people when they're 20 years old to be ordained. But there was one little boy who was so extraordinary that Buddha personally admitted him to be ordained at a very small age. Reason being that he was able to answer 10 questions very wisely. Those 10 questions were documented and later on became a standard question and answers for all novices. Therefore, the Samana Panna. I have so far covered from question 1 to 5, namely, what is 1? All beings would have to survive on nutriments. And what is 2? Namarupa. That all beings essentially are the combination of Namarupa. What's 3? All beings have 3 feelings. That boils down to pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feeling. These boil down into what's 4? Four Noble Truths. But then how do you manifest, how do you develop the doctrine of Four Noble Truths? You start from the 5 aggregates, and now we have come to 6. So that's where we are. But rather, instead of simply introducing what is 6, which is quite simple, is the 6 sense faculties. What's so particular about it? It's the implication of the 6 sense faculties, especially in terms of the potential impact of these 6 sense faculties on our meditation, on how we change our mental quality, does deserve mentioning. So my introduction of the 6 sense faculties would be a little bit unorthodox, if you will. I will have a very brief introduction of the 6 sense faculties and quickly move on into what is going through the 6 sense faculties. That would be the most important part. Okay. Now, what is 6? Pretty straightforwardly, the 6 faculties: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. These are commonly referred to as the internal sense media. But if you frequently read the Nikaya, the Pali Nikayas, you will notice they rarely put that in singular form, referring to eyes, ears, nose, but instead always go in pair. Whenever there's mentioning of eyes, you will be eye and sight, seeing. Whenever you mentioning ears, hearing, nose, smelling. So these are internal basis and external basis. And I have a quick summary for those of you who understand the Chinese characters. Okay, these are called 6. You may call it seats or locations. Translated into modern language, English language that is, they are the receptacles receiving information, and that would be the key feature you will have in mind. Okay. So here are the pair. You have ear and sound, nose and odor, tongue and taste, body and touch, mind and mental object. Essentially, like I just briefly summarized, how do you manifest the Four Noble Truths? There are actually 3 analytic frameworks that you can manifest the Four Noble Truths. One way is through the 5 aggregates, and you'll quickly notice the entire Pali Nikaya, or the so-called Pali tradition. based on their expectations on the 5 aggregates predominantly. The second analytic framework will be through the 6 sense faculties. That's where your actual practice comes into play. This is where you get the information, you make contact, that is your mental contact with the outside world, and where you can exercise your own training. The third analytic framework is something beyond linguistic description, but still experiential, which is Nibbana. So that would be the 3 analytic framework. So here, what's special about this? Let's move on quickly is that these so-called internal and external sense bases, if you take a close look at it, in Pali it's asava, in Sanskrit it's ashrava, but that original term does not really give you any good sense. Translated into English, you'll see the difference. Sometimes it's being translated as tense, sometimes it's being translated influx. Why? Because in terms of the actual effects that these 6 sense bases would give you, would be they actually create tense. But in terms of the motion, the function they offer they allow for influx, either influx or outflux. Okay, so it is because, just like that picture is showing, if you are closing these doors, okay, these seats, you can pretty much expel or at least stop those dust outside. So even though you have a dirty window inside, you maintain a clean room, which is our mind. But if you keep that window open, and the wider you open it, as you can imagine, the inside will become dirtier. So that's what it means, tense. Because of the influx, then you have tense. So this would be what I want to emphasize with today's short introduction. It's the asava that is really signifying the importance of the 6 sense faculties, internal and external. So tense, they are basically flow of information from the object to the mind through the senses. Yes, please come in. The information, to give you a graphic description, simply like this. Okay? You see an object, it's eye, sight. Then making that contact, as you know, it would be a consciousness. Now, for that part, we're tossing it aside. Now, the thing is, look at that bracketed translation. Tense sometimes, actually quite often, especially given the Pali context, suggests the process of fermentations. So in addition to the function I've just mentioned, influx, allowing for influx, the effect, creating tense, it also suggests a process, which means fermentation. Now, why is it that we call it fermentation? Here, first you see, then usually, say, if you see something displeasing, you will turn away, try to see something else, at least neutral, preferably more pleasing. Now, suppose upon the first sight, gee, that's something I really want, okay? Then you take a second look, and it gives a cycle. Look more and more and more. It becomes more and more pleasing. It becomes what? You lock on the object, that becomes attachment. You cling to it without knowing it. That's really what happened the worst scenario, if you will. So what we call it fermentation is that chemically, fermentation refers to a process where there's a chemical breakdown of a substance by bacteria. So breakdown is a gradual process. It requires the original substance in some conducive conditions. And if you put this particular cycle into perspective, that the conducive condition is that you are opening your sixth sense faculty, the sixth sense stores, and allowing bacteria, the defilement, come into your mind. That creates the conducive condition for fermentation. Fermentation, of course, refers to the unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome verbal and bodily expressions. So, this process in the Pali context, we describe it full of mental volition. That it's not the physical basis of I that is at fault. What is fault is to see and want to see more, and eventually you do see more. So the good food itself is not at fault. It's your attachment that is problematic. Okay? Let's refer back to the original sutra. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha was explicating a very profound doctrine called contemplation of dualities. This is what he said toward the end of the sutra. All sight, sound, smell, taste, tactile sensation, and ideas, the six sense faculties, that are either welcome, appealing, agreeable, as long as they are said to exist. Now, that's the key. If you consider that pleasing, agreeable, welcome thing as real, then together in this world, they become bliss. Nothing wrong so far. The problem is when they cease to exist. They are supposed by them to be stressed. Frustration. The original Pali term is what? Dukkha. Okay? That's what it happens. You are taking something that does not have intrinsic existence. As long as that particular thing is welcome, appealing, agreeable, you think that's real. And when they're gone, you think something really pleasing is gone. You feel distress. That feeling per se is dukkha, but your delusional recognition of that thing as pleasing, as permanent, is further deeper dukkha. Okay? That's what this sutra is about. So the stopping of self-identity, the I idea, okay, is viewed by the noble ones as bliss instead of the five, six sense faculties. So, but the idea from the noble ones is quite contrary to our common senses. So this is contrary to what's seen by the world as a whole. What others say is blissful, those things. The noble ones say is dukkha. What others say is dukkha, the noble says bliss. And really, from this particular example, the Buddha said, see the Dharma, hard to understand. Here, those who don't know are confused. This brings back to the very beginning. Why do I need to summarize that from 1 to 5? And especially mentioning the three analytic framework. Because there are different ways of manifesting the Four Noble Truths. Sometimes you can manifest the truth from the secular, mundane point of view. After all, we live in this world. We still have this physical being that requires worldly knowledge. But we also need to know that there are something beyond linguistic description, but still experiential. And therefore, it's imperative, really, to understand those analytic framework so as not to be confused. And here is another interesting simile. The asavas are cankers. Cankers is a medical, sometimes described as a medical situation. And it usually happens when you have stored, say, typical example, you have stored some undigested food in your stomach. Day by day, gradually, it gives you problem, cankers. So what's so important about this? If you recall what I've just shown you, how you become locked on those objects. You keep on receiving information. You want to store it, thinking, I possess this, it's pleasing. You never get rid of it. What happened? They are corrupt things, and they become corrupted. They give you cankerous. So that's what happens here. Sense pleasure, existence, false views, ignorance, all these considered as unwholesome and undesirable qualities, you keep on storing them. Not that these particular things are beyond cleansing, no. It's that you don't want to get rid of them because you want them more and more and more. So that's the whole problem. The entire Pali Nikaya, the Pali canon was trying to convince you that this is not good practice. Okay? Face the fact, know the reality, get rid of those. So, doctrinally, now you probably have get the idea. So these are not really desirable quality. Then, what does that have to do with my everyday life, to my personal being? I'm still a living person right here. Here's the implication. Craving, among other things, it sets you on fire. I think this is not very difficult to understand. When you're angry about something, when you're mad at somebody, it's burning rage. When, say, you have a lust for young boy, maybe the hot chick. For young ladies, maybe the handsome dude. And then you have the passion, it's burning desire, okay? All burning. Even something abstract, say artists trying to create a masterpiece, okay? Even during the stage, when he was only trying to visualize it, it's still intangible. There's a burning passion trying to make it real. Okay? All these are forms of craving that have physical impact on you. The crux of the issue is that, number one, have you identified it? Number two, have you understood the implication of these feelings? And number three, more importantly, do you even want to get rid of it? Oftentimes, practitioners miss this whole point. So, again, they come in pair. The ear is a flame, sounds are a flame, the pair. Nose and aromas, a flame. Tongue and flavors, a flame. Body, tactile sensations, flame. Intellect, ideas. Idea here referring to both constructive ideas and destructive ideas. Okay, some are wholesome, some are unwholesome. So, intellectual consciousness, a flame. All these set you on fire, more or less. Anything that arises in dependence on intellect contact, experience as pleasure, pain, and so on and so forth, that too is a flame. So, including the tangible and non-tangible. A flame with what? Now, you really need to read that paragraph very carefully. A flame with the fire of passion. True, granted. If you want to cultivate your mind, that still requires a passion. But that kind of passion does not drive you to have unwholesome desires. Instead, that passion drives you onto the path of deliverance. That's qualitatively different, so don't mix it up. A flame, I tell you, with birth, age, and death, with sorrows. See here? The other path, when you have the passion to cultivate and train your mind, that leads to a different path where birth is no longer. Okay? It ceases to exist. So that's a wholly different path. And this would be interesting to mention as well that the true meaning of sila, although oftentimes being translated as precept. In the real Pali context, it's translated as cooling off. That when you have virtues, when you set yourself onto a different path, onto the path of delivery, it gives you the cooling effect. Okay, so away from the craving, that means guard your sense faculties and onto a different path, cultivating your virtues. Let us again, referring to the sutra. As you know, the Samyutta Nikaya predominantly deal with the profound doctrines of Dharma. By comparison, the Majjhima Nikaya, they often give you very specific instructions about how do you go about training yourself. So here, I'm referring to Majjhima Nikaya, number 137. It very usefully and specifically indicated there are sources of emotions, there are use of emotions, and more importantly, there are ideal emotional state wherein you can train yourself. So let's address that one by one. First, dukkha. The Samyutta Nikaya indicated when you fail to acknowledge and recognize the reality of the cankers or asava, it gives you dukkha. Whereas the noble ones really know the opposite. Still, dukkha is not entirely useless. Depends on how you put that into good use. This is what the previous Majjhima Nikaya Sutra is talking about. So there are right usage of dukkha. One simple effect is that here is the doctrinal evidence, if you will, that supports the statement. How come we can have right usage of dukkha? Doctrinally, everything is bound to change. That means good things, pleasing things are bound to change. By the same token, unpleasant things are also bound to change. Therefore, it is totally legitimate and possible that you can expect dukkha to have a change sometime, somewhere down the road. When there's a change, you can manipulate. So the implication is that pain, for example, we do experience that from time to time, if not on a daily basis, okay, at least in our life experience. The pain from physical illness is bound to change. Those of you who are experienced or have some experience in meditating, you know that sometimes it can be hard on your legs. You really want to drop the training. But as you gain more experience, you quickly or gradually realize that pain eventually change. They even go away. And therefore, thereby, you recognize the direct knowledge that pain and suffering are two separate processes. Pain is physically based, suffering is mentally based, and the latter really can be avoided. Okay? So, therefore, that leads to the third ideal, useful instruction. There can be an ideal emotion where you can formulate on your own. While unpleasant bodily feeling arises, mental feelings does not arise. Now, of course, does not arise at all, only fit for Buddha and Arahant. That's completely, okay? No more training for them. Those under Arahant, every one of us here, at least for me, I'm not entirely sure about you, perhaps we have one or two Arahant among us, okay? We are all trainees. Therefore, it won't be totally does not arise for us, but at least gradually decreasing. That's what the training is all about. Again, supported by our doctrinal understanding. Earlier I've mentioned about the 5 aggregates. thereby out of the 5 aggregated problems, okay, you would have had 4 out of 5 subdue. Now all you have to do is dealing with your mind. So that's the implication here. What if you think, I'm fine. I don't have strong passion. I don't have strong rage. I don't even have some, most commonly, desire for anything. I'm fine. Why do I still have to train my mind? Only recently, actually, I met one of my old friends. I met her when I was still a graduate student, just way back. And she told me that it seems to her a lot of the things that I have been talking about tonight are merely knowledge. That they are not practical to her daily life. Therefore, the implication, although she didn't say that explicitly, the implication is that she was no longer interested in understanding those doctrines. Now, as you can see, on the one hand, true, practice is the most important thing. But on the other hand, if you put yourself in that position, have you tried enough to really apply the knowledge onto your daily training? Okay, that probably is more important. So, I'm fine. Instead of accusing you, you're not trying hard enough, the Buddhist way would be, are you really fine? Let me tell you, let me show you some of the possible perils if you fail to see the reality. A person who is blind to danger. Here is one thing. Failing to realize that your mind, for instance, those of you who are familiar with meditations, how do you identify, how do you recognize that your mind was being in an unconscious state or tranquilized state? You still have to learn that from the doctrine, from the sutra, before you can verify that in your meditation, right? So, here is one good example. Without that doctrinal understanding, most likely you would mistake one particular so-called equanimity, if you will, okay, as something dull, boring, and you quickly pass it without acknowledging, recognizing that was a great opportunity for you to move on into a different stage. So here says that here is the peril. In addition to that, you won't be able to see what is really permanent and what is the possibility of get rid of the delusion. You are staying in that cycle, fooling around, okay, feeling you're fine, while your delusion remains unrooted, and your daily so-called feel fine still filled with at least implicit craving, aversion, and delusion, even if you don't want to recognize it that way. So, this is why such moments do not go beyond the sensory stimuli that generated them. I don't know how I can put it more plainly, because this is the truth. And given the example that I have just mentioned of my old friend, I can only say with regret that mere doctrinal understanding is also not adequate. You really need to put yourself into routine, if not zealous training, okay, to be able to verify these doctrinal teachings. All right, suffice to say, we want to acquire the freedom from the asavas. As I have just mentioned, that full freedom from the asava would be arahantship, Buddhahood. All those under it, okay, we would be so-called trainees. That means we still have a lot to learn. Still, keep in mind, the whole point is that keep on training instead of setting up an unrealistic goal. So when the disciple's mind is liberated from the taint by the completion of the path of arahantship, he reveals his newly won freedom. This is the so-called lion's roar. If you repeatedly come into this particular term, that suggests this particular person have achieved the arahantship. Birth is destroyed, spiritual life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming back to any state of being. This is a different path. So, that's the end result. Again, let's bring it back to our daily life. What's the implication for my current state, which is not perfect yet? Here, pain need not be suffered. And here's a very interesting question. I have break it down into several more slides because they originally contained in one sutra. The first question brought up by the Buddha himself was bhikkhu. Because what are the asavas that are to be removed through forbearance? As you can see, since this is so specific, it implies there are other possible strategies. Okay, we start from the first one, forbearance. I have just elaborated to some extent. Pain and suffering are two separate processes. One is physically based, one is mentally based. So, once you realize that, practice meditation, samadhi, hopefully you can gain some, at least, excess concentration. Using that concentration, cultivate your insight, and therefore will be able to reduce your future chances of creating, repeating karma. This way, through forbearance, okay, yes, there will be painful experiences during the training, but once you realize that, you will go through that stage. And to some extent, I can also say, fear need not be suffered, even though fear is a mental quality. But still, I think there was a sutra in Samyutta Nikaya where bhikkhus being frightened by a certain kind of evil spirits. And the Buddha instructed them, instead of identifying for them the real reasons of their fear, the Buddha's instruction was directly deal with the mental quality of fear. When you get rid of that feeling, okay, you don't need to know the origin. Okay, job is done. So maybe some other time we can elaborate on the very interesting sutra. But here is forbearance. Alright? And second question, bhikkhu. What are the asavas that are to be removed through avoidance? Sometimes you can prevent that from happening in the first place, that you don't even have to bear with that unpleasant effect. So what is to be done in this particular situation? Here the simile is that whoever and whatever would lead you onto an unwholesome path, that means give rise to craving, give rise to aversion, they constitute a small seed. Okay? And the samsara actually become a full-fledged path or cycle out of that small seed. So the most useful way of removing the asavas through avoidance would be on your own, being alone. This is why you see so frequently in the Pali Nikaya that because the Buddha himself then pick up a rather remote place and then staying secluded meditating. And it also encourages bhikkhus to choose those spots. And not only that, it also suggests that stay away from the crowd until your mind has been trained adequate enough. Okay, that way you stay away from the desirable things. So with right mindfulness, stay away from unwholesome places, stay away from unwholesome friends, companions. That way you can remove the asavas through avoidance. Still further, because what are the asavas that are to be removed? Through rejection. There are situations where you need to confront. It's already present right in front of you. So there are situations you would do this through rejection. This is predominantly exercised through taking the precept, cultivating your virtues. Not killing, not telling lies, etc., etc. I don't have to elaborate the rest. You get the idea. This will be outright rejected. It's also useful in removing the asavas. All these apply to the six sense faculties, internally and externally. So you can expand the agenda on your own. Sometimes you are particularly sensitive maybe to color. Some people are particularly sensitive to touches, solid touch, soft touch, and some intangible things, even music, okay? So they are all included in this. Still further, because what are the asavas that are to be removed through cultivation? Instead of, in addition to passively waiting, rejecting, you can actually cultivate some good qualities that will be able to deter the asavas. And these will be the 7 factors conducive to enlightenment. Which starts from choosing the right Dhamma. Okay? And this again reaffirms what I earlier mentioned, that doctrinal study is still essential. Although, from the practical point of view, for trainees like us, choosing the right Dhamma also referring to choosing the right training method for yourself. So that will be through cultivation. What will happen if you do all those? One who abides in the restraint of all asavas. Look at the wording here. We abide in the restraint, okay, not yet uprooting. Okay, so it's reasonable expectation. He has cut off craving, shaken off fetters, having become fully aware of the nature of self-conceit. This I is delusional, has made an end to dukkha. Even if that does not explicitly refers to nibbana, it's pretty close to that. Right. So what does the sutra have to say? The sutra says, after you have completely cultivated the 7 factors conducive to nibbana, all your desires and cravings would be uprooted forever. 10 fetters uprooted forever. You would have ended, you have reached the edge of dukkha. That would be the very moment of true deliverance. So hopefully, again, I'm concluding my presentation. The idea is that introducing the 6 sense faculties, but with the main focus of expanding the agenda into what the implication of these 6 sense faculties are. Okay. Hopefully, I have introduced some useful information to you. Thank you.